Good afternoon. Welcome, Ryan. Can you hear me?
Hey, Jim, how you doing?
Fantastic. Fantastic. Happy Wednesday. Good afternoon, Rayanne. Thanks so much for
Hello.
joining us.
Of course.
It's been too long.
All
I know
right.
it's been a really long time, right? Hey,
Absolutely.
Ryan, I want to hear the dad joke.
Do you know when a bad joke becomes a dad joke?
No, when?
When the punchline becomes apparent.
Oh, there
Ah,
we go.
that's
Tanya,
great.
hello.
Welcome, Tanya.
How are you all today?
Doing well, thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining.
Hey, that's a
Thank
super cool
you.
background, Jim.
Oh, thank you.
I like that.
Thank you.
Tanya, it's been a while for you too. I haven't seen you in a while.
I
It's been
know.
too long, Ray. I
Yeah.
missed you.
Hello, Ross.
Welcome,
Hello.
Ross. Well, I'm sure everybody is looking forward to cooler autumn temperatures, not to mention football season
Absolutely.
and playoffs in baseball.
Fun stuff.
It's been an unprecedented hot summer for so many of us and friends and family across the country.
True.
Yep.
Welcome, Sue. Thanks for joining.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Brian. We have 35 RSVPs, so we will probably have quite a number of friends joining us even after we kick this off at 12:30 Eastern. I should make sure everyone can see my screen, which I'll be sharing in just a moment.
So I'm trying to figure out whose backgrounds are like real and like Brian, is that real?
It is not.
Oh, it kind of looks like it because of
Yeah.
the, like that, like it's in your background. And then Sue, that's pretty. That looks like art. I like it. Ross,
Yeah,
yours is
that's
real,
a
right? Ryan's is real.
Lockheed Martin Women in Network kind of
Really? That
logo.
is
Yeah.
nice. I like
Yep,
that a lot.
thanks.
All righty. Can anybody see my screen?
It's coming up. Well, it says you've started, just don't see the content yet.
Okay.
Does anybody see the content? Oh yeah, there it is.
I do.
Okay.
Now we do.
Excellent. Excellent. And here. Fantastic. Okay. Well, we are just about at 12:30. Thanks everyone again for joining. We are very privileged to have Rayanne Bruno present to us today, and I will be introducing her in a few moments. But I'm going to start off with some HDI news. And then we'll go right into a presentation from Rayanne, Cultivating a Culture of Engagement in the Hybrid Workplace. We'll save the last 10 minutes for your questions and open discussion. And then we have an exit survey that's very important to us. We use your feedback for continuous improvement of our meetings and it's also a valuable opportunity to receive additional information and direct contact from Rayanne, if you'd like. So I'd like to start off with not only thanking you, but thanking our local chapter officers. We have Sue Giliberti with us, Joe Alexander, and James Moore, and they're very much involved in each and every event that we have. We also have great sponsors. We're highly reliant on our sponsorships, and want to take my hat off and thank gold sponsors 1IO, Robert Half, who is also a national sponsor, national diamond sponsor and sponsor of our premier awards. This is the time frame that we're accepting award nominations for Best Service and Support Analyst, Best Service and Support Technician, and a whole list of awards. That's a great opportunity to recognize your colleagues and staff. It's my favorite time of year of recognition. We also have Resolve, another national sponsor, and our silver sponsor is Ingate. In terms of upcoming events, we have another web conference event that we're going to hold on Thursday, October 5th. We'll have Doug Raybold, who's an outstanding speaker. He's also chairman of the board of our HDI local chapter's overall corporation. International speaker, author, certified HDI trainer, recognized 4 times as one of the top 25 thought leaders, and a key customer experience influencer. He will be presenting customer experience and customer service. What is the difference, and going over the various metrics for each. We also have Service Management World right around the corner, starting with pre-conference workshops on Saturday, November 11th, and going through Wednesday the 15th. That's nearby at the Lowe's Sapphire Falls Resort at Universal Orlando. There is an early bird discount of $350 for registration before September 29th. So any paid memberships, that is $150 for a paid chapter membership, receives $350 back. We also have free community HDI memberships as well, but all paid memberships get discounts on all HDI annual conferences and training. The next few slides are a commercial for Service Management World. If you're not already registered, there's some great keynote speakers. Pardon me, Jim Davidson is a well-known expert on resilience, personal, team, and leadership resilience. Kian Gohar is a futurist and has a best-selling book, Competing in the New World of Work. He'll be presenting on innovation and convergence in the 21st century. Sarah Fresca will also be doing a keynote, and she's an innovation expert. Case studies by many prominent organizations, including local organizations like Health First, and I see Giant Eagle from my hometown. So a lot of valuable content and training will be provided at Service Management World. These are some of the topics. Artificial intelligence and automation are hugely important in service management, and there's a lot of coverage for that. Enterprise service management, knowledge management, and KCS, best practices. So a wealth of these topics will be covered. And by the way, this presentation, this recording will be posted along with the actual PDFs of the presentation no later than tomorrow morning on our website, hdicfl.com. Here's some of the training courses that are available. A brand new experience level agreement, a practitioner course, artificial intelligence. I see ITIL 4 Foundation in there, and just a lot of valuable content that is going to be provided. And once again, we're getting close to the date, so book now and get your discount. As an important note, whenever you register for any kind of HDI training or annual conferences, please use our local chapter code LCMCF, and it certainly is great to get the associated discounts with each of these types of training and conferences. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rayanne Bruno. Many of you already know Rayanne from HDI training and certification courses, her frequent industry conference speaking engagements, including Support World Live and Service Management World. Rayanne is truly a thought leader and an industry rock star, president of Business Solutions Training, an organization that develops and enhances skills in leadership, service communications.
Right, but that's for pride, right?
Rayanne has trained all levels of employees in the areas of
Right, right.
communications, internal
Okay.
marketing, metrics, process improvement, idle service management, certification
Okay.
preparation,
All right, good.
high performance teaming, and leadership skills. She's a very celebrated speaker. Welcome
Yeah.
to our
Yeah,
event,
for the
Rayanne
black
Bruno.
folks, they're
Thank you
critical.
so
Yeah,
much. And
it looks like
everybody, thank you for
when I bring
being
up
here.
the
I don't know if you
runway,
want to
which
mute
is
her.
good.
Yes, I think we
It
need
looks
to
like they're
mute.
doing some work.
And then it's not letting me
speaker here.
share until you stop.
Yes, I just stopped sharing.
Okay.
Stop video. And
So for some reason, it's still not giving me that share capability. It still says you.
okay, I will okay, hit the
All
button
right,
again.
let's
You
try
should be able
that
to
now.
share
There
right
we
now.
go. All right. Thanks everyone for being here. And that's a
Oops.
hi, I've got it. I'm unmuted, right?
Yes.
Okay, so hi everyone, welcome and thank you for being here. And honestly, I think the privilege is mine to be able to be here and speak for you more than the privilege being the local chapters. But I do appreciate it, and I do wish I was still as young as that picture that you showed, Jim. Thank you for that. So here we're going to talk about just creating this culture of engagement, and a lot of us have gone through a lot over the last few years with the pandemic and companies trying to figure out what does our culture really look like now, or trying to jump back to how it was previously. And we're also seeing a lot about just what's happening in in the world with the recession or potential recession, et cetera, and just belts getting tighter and people having a lot more responsibility. So my goal today is to share a lot of ideas around that and some statistics. So I will show some statistics and to give some ideas. Also, at the end of the presentation, I have more content for you. And as Jim mentioned, there will also be some PDFs of some studies and some additional information. So hopefully that will help. And he had mentioned experience. I am an APMG certified trainer for all of the experience classes, and that practitioner class is actually the one that I am teaching. And I see Daryl's here. He'll be teaching KCS at conference, but I will talk to you a little bit about experience toward the end of this as well. Because when you think about it, the culture of a company is very much about the experience of the employees within the organization. So if we look at this new world of work, the priorities have changed. I think that's one thing that the pandemic taught everybody, is that I can have work-life balance. Although I think for some, it started not to be balanced because they found themselves, working even longer. So we all had to learn how to adapt and be flexible and balance work and outside of work and all the different competing priorities in our lives. So their expectations have changed from companies. And what's been very interesting is that companies were very focused on employees' well-being and keeping those employees and trying to build that culture still, or just keep people connected to each other. And then as we've come out of it, there are some companies who feel like they can just turn the switch and go right back to where they were. And everybody else is like, whoa, wait, what? What about all these things that you did before? What about all these things that were important? Are you saying they're not as important any longer? And I'll share some examples as we go through that. But they want to work for companies that have values that they believe in, and they want to feel valued by those companies, and they want to be able to have that work-life balance. People are much more in tune to that now. So they want their work life to fit their lifestyle, and they want to be able to have an opportunity for really these things that you see at the bottom: the flexibility, some of these I've already mentioned, even community. And people are surprised by that sometimes. They're like, oh no, people love working at home, but they still need to have that sense of community and belonging and identity. And also, they want to be able to trust their organizations, and they want to feel trusted. So there needs to be some level of transparency. And then today, a lot of people are looking for stability. How do I know that my position is still going to be here? What is the future for this organization? What are they working toward? And they want to know that up front. So what I want to do first is share some stats. Now in 2022, this study had come out, and it was saying that almost half of the US workforce was working from home at that time. And when they interviewed employees, 57% said they would leave those companies if they didn't offer options for remote work. We're going to see a similar statistic a little bit later, a little lower, but notice it's saying options for remote work. I think that's a really big word that we need to take into account of what employees really want. A lot of them said that they would only, now at that time, 59%, because they had this option. They said they would consider only companies that would give them the ability to work from anywhere. And I've seen people really take advantage of that, right? I know someone who traveled and stayed in different countries and worked from there, always on the US time zone, but definitely made the most of that work from anywhere. And then 65% would only consider roles that gave them flexible hours. And that is one thing that I think a lot of companies didn't give as much prior to. Some companies did, but just having flexibility in their hours. I think we saw an increase in tolerance of, okay, from this time to this time, I've got to do this, so I won't be available, but I'll work longer today. So just having some level of control over flexibility. And then about half said that they really felt that this increased their productivity and reduced their stress level and increased their engagement overall. Now, a current study says that by 2025, there's going to be just this massive generational shift in the workforce. And if companies aren't planning it today, they're going to have to, 75% might have to adapt these hybrid work strategies. And I think work strategies is another big word, right? It's what is our strategy around it? It's not okay, let's go back to where we were, and or just, you know, like, we have to look at this. We have to have some forethought, and we have to be able to accomplish business goals, but also attract the talent that we want, engage them, retain them, all of these different pieces. So current state, from a recent SHRM survey, who actually surveyed employers, 2% of those companies said they never plan to have people go back to the office. 51% said they do require all employees with some level of in-person work. And then 39%, an additional 39%, they plan to have people come into work by the end of 2024, or potentially having, you know, that option, the hybrid environment, about 8% by 2025. And yet still half, we saw that number before, 59%, but 47 still say they'll change jobs if they ever mandate a full-time return to office policy. So let's go ahead and see that from you right now. I would just really like to see what you're experiencing in your organizations. How many of you have the hybrid environment where you're working partly remotely and partly at the office? If you could raise your hand, please. You can do that in chat. No one? Or we're just not finding how to raise our hands yet? Okay, I'm seeing some. Thank you, Mark. All right, so we've got some. Not seeing a lot right now. Okay, I wouldn't even say a quarter of you. Okay, maybe we're getting there. We're getting there. All right. All right. Thank you. Go ahead. You can just write it in chat too if you're having some difficulty finding the raise of your hand. If you could take your hands down now, how many of you are working fully remote? Fully remotely? Anyone? That's kind of interesting. I read an article, I think it was that same SHRM study, that said that it used to be you would see a lot of opportunities for work from anywhere or fully remote positions, but you're seeing a lot less of those. Most of them are the hybrid environment. Okay, so is anybody fully back in the office? Oh, that's a good sign. Okay, I'm glad to see that. And Ryan said he's been full-time remote since 2010, but across the organization, it's a mix of on-site, full-time with hybrid, and then those near the office to be in the office at least 3 days a week. So Chrissy, at least it's 3 days. And that's been interesting too. I have seen some people get a little upset with that. You know, I stayed, I stayed close to my office. Now I have to come in 3 days a week and that person doesn't, you know, so it's, I don't know if you've seen any of that, Christy, if you can just let us know in chat as well, that some people don't appreciate that only people who are near the office have to come in. Just let us know their opinion on that. So this is a quote from an author, and then Catherine Bellevue, I think that's how you say her name, from Hasbro. And it said that what's a lot of organizations where they're making a mistake is they're just giving this one size fits all solution, or their strategy is this is what it is for everyone. But we're starting to see even in chat that, okay, we get, you know, some of you we hired during the pandemic and we knew you weren't in the same state and we said that was fine. It's still fine. But those of you who are close within this many miles from the office, we'd like to see you in the office. And two things I'd like you to put in chat, Christy. One is, are the days dictated? Like, are they certain days that you have to come in, or do you have flexibility to choose? And then you did say, so you're full-time remote. Those that are near the office have a mixed bag of emotions. Some are excited and others just want to stay home. All right. And I think we're seeing that across the world, right? Here we're saying, they're saying, you know, they say we're going to give you more opportunity. We're going to give you flexibility. This is an inclusive culture. But then when they're making these policies, they're not necessarily considering one of the really important pieces, and that's the sense of fulfillment. And I like how you said some people want to get back in the office. They're excited for that. And I heard that throughout the pandemic through training and consulting. I heard some people saying, I can't wait to get back with people. And other are like, I'm good coming from home, you know, staying home. So there is a mix. And I think that that's what's important, you know, this personal side of it, right? We need to understand at an individual level what people are expecting or wanting as well. Interestingly, we're starting to see people feeling like they don't have the same level of work-life balance that they thought. It decreased a little in 2023. I think this is something that people are going to keep their eyes on. But I think the quote below is even more important. It's saying when we consider balance, it's not as much about time management as it is about boundary management, that it's giving people options, giving them choices. And as Christy said, their days aren't dictated, but if there are meetings, then you're expected to be there. Or I've seen, you know, for example, my son works for an organization that wants them in 3 days a week, but they can choose their days. But I actually meant to say this back here about this one size fits all. Weston Morris with Unisys, it's a large global company. He said that their top leadership believes that being in person allows for higher creativity and better collaboration. But they didn't say you have to be in the office this many days. What they said instead is if you are kind of to the point of Christy, if you're having a meeting or if you're having an event where collaboration is a part of it, you know, a really important part of it, or creativity, if you're like reworking something or driving improvement, then be in person. And then that company supported it. They had this huge meeting in one of their offices in a big city. And he said that the individuals were saying, oh, this was so great. You could understand everybody. It was really nice to be around everybody. And the company did pay for them all for that trip. Their travel expenses were covered. So instead of just saying, all right, everybody back to the office or all meetings are on premise, instead put some, you know, be deliberate about it and allow your organization, the people making the decisions, to be deliberate about it. So just some different views that we're seeing on return to the office. There are a lot of employers that believe that working in person fosters better collaboration, similar to what I just shared. And also they just feel like it's better for business in general. Now that, you know, that's a little, in general, it's better for business. I think that statements like that need to be qualified. In what way? In what areas? What are we seeing? You know, can we really show that it is better for business? Potentially the collaboration, the higher creativity, the increased innovation, better for business. And I think when employees understand this, just like in that meeting that Weston had, he said, you know, they saw the value in it. They felt the value in it. And they will do that again when they have that kind of a meeting. And that's what we need to be able to do, is really quantify it. Now, this is the one where 47% say again that if it's full-time back to the office, they'll change companies. And this is really interesting. It says that 80% of bosses, so companies, regret the way they did the return on to office. And what was real successful, the companies that have been very successful with it, they involved their employees. And for a while, my older son was working from here because traffic in Atlanta is not fun. And where he was working was in Midtown, and they could work from from home, and they had the option of going into the office. And I heard several meetings of executives with the teams asking, tell me about working from home. Do you feel like you can collaborate? And just getting their opinion on return to office. And there's a quote that I love that some of you have heard me say over and over again, but it's by Dale Carnegie. And it is that people are committed to that which they help create. So in that organization, they had conversations with them, and then they said, this is what we're seeing, and this is what we'd like to see. And they did say that they would like to have them in the office. And now he lives close to the office, and that's fine. And I actually asked him, because he's a Gen Z that we talk about a lot. I just said, so how do you feel about going in the office? Are you seeing value in it? And he's like, absolutely. He said, it's great. So at first he's like, I'm going to have to get up earlier. I'm actually going to have to get dressed. And, he was saying all these things that he didn't like about it. But now that he's there, he is seeing the value in it. So I think that, again, it needs to be intentional. The reason that we want to see people in person. And I also think the communication still needs to be open. We need to understand the value from their perspective. And actually, to share another story, there's an organization that they do employee pulse surveys on an ongoing basis, and they were all fully remote. And there was a question around, do you feel valued by your organization? And that number was really high. Yes. Like most people felt very valued, and it was highly valued. Not just I feel valued, it was highly valued. And then all of a sudden that that just tanked. It went low. And the leaders were like, whoa, why is this? And they started to talk about maybe some different ideas for recognition. And then what they decided is, let's have meetings, let's have one-on-ones, let's try to understand what kind of recognition is going to help. What came out in the meetings is that there was this mandate that everybody is now required to be in the office 2 days a week. And so that tanked. You don't value me. This is a surprise. You didn't talk to me. We were doing just fine. Everything was good. Why do we have to come back into the office? So what they did is they did get really intentional about it. The leaders worked with their teams, and they said, what will make being in the office valuable to you? So this is when they have one-on-ones. This is when they have creative collaboration meetings. This is also when they do some fun things with the teams. So that they do get that sense of community and belonging, which is something else that's very important to employees. And I would love to see some of the things that your organization is doing along those lines. Like, how are they making time in the office valuable to your team, to you, and how is that better for the business? I would love for you to post that in chat, please. And then 94% of executives that were surveyed, they said that culture is really, really important for business success, which aligns with that comment of they feel that when people are in the office, they feel that culture more. But 50% of the employees say that they don't even know what their values are. And yet, generationally, what they say about millennials and Gen Z, ever since the millennials, they care a whole lot about what their company is in business to do, the values of that organization, and they care a whole lot about how what they do every day is impacting what the organization is doing. So if we're not living the values of our organization, then people are going to feel disconnected. And an example, years ago in a class, I had someone that was a first tier analyst on a service desk, and we were talking about corporate values. And she actually shared, she said, well, one of our values is innovation. And she said, and what we do in the company is we tell you that if there is something that you think will allow you to be more productive in your jobs, or make it easier, or would be good for your team, go ahead and try out the technology, even if it's not part of our core standard technology. And she said, and then from a support perspective, we say we will support that innovation effort by giving you our best effort, which is 10 minutes. We will try for 10 minutes to help you if you have any issues. If we cannot, you're going to have to go to that manufacturer. And then she said, but the company then supports that by, hey, if you found out that having this iPad at a job site what really increased your productivity, made your job a whole lot easier, then here is the form to submit for us to review that and understand its business impact and potentially put it into our standard suite of technology. So that's a great I mean, that's a way that people can be committed to that which they help create. It's a way that they've got a voice, and it's a way that they're really supporting that, yes, innovation is a value. So as I speak, any examples that you have of your organization, please either raise your hand and share or put it in chat, because chat can be saved. And I think then that gives other people other ideas in their companies. So this whole idea of the culture and the corporate values and people feeling valued, 54% of employees would take a pay cut to work for a company with values that align with what's important to them. And 82% say that it's important to be seen as a person, as an individual, not just as a number or as a part of a group. And yet 45% don't feel like they're really seen that way. And then Ryan, thank you. He's saying that their organizations, you picked up some really big words there, Ryan. He said they struggle a little bit due to lack of trust in the absence of on-site supervision. And I think that's kind of one of those, can we go back to where we were, or it's a belief, right? And that's an interesting, one of the studies that I'm giving you, it talks about getting millennials into some leadership positions or getting them involved in some decisions, because soon enough they're going to be there, they probably almost are the majority in the work force, but also because of that, that piece about that belief, like these beliefs that this is the only way. And I think the important thing to know about culture, and I have a couple of things about culture in the extra slides, or not culture, but generations. I'm not saying that everybody in a generation is the same. However, people are shaped by the way they grew up. And so if you grew up working in the office every day and not having that collaboration virtually, then you might not see the value in it, or you might not think that way. And Gen Z has grown up with technology, and a lot of them finished college during the pandemic virtually. Like my older son, I guess his master's ended up, it was hybrid. A lot of it was virtual, but they collaborated, they used technology, they had a great digital experience, they were able to work when they wanted. All these things that shaped them while they were going to school, they now have these expectations of a company. So we've got to be careful that maybe some thoughts from before aren't driving where we need to be in the future, or we'll be part of that 75% that needs to come up with new strategies, or that might be looking to fill open positions. So you are talking about entry level and junior, and then there's the underlying driver of the return to office, transparency. Okay, I need to promote workplace culture. So good. I think they're saying things that we're seeing in the studies too, right, Ryan? So it is about culture, but there are ways to build culture in this type of an environment, right? In a hybrid environment. So this study talked about, this is something you have in the study, but recognition needs to be embedded in your culture. And that word experience came up earlier. We need to look at the employee experience, all of them, leaders as well, right? And recognition does need to be part of our culture. And also just understanding expectations and being careful not to dictate. We need to have you in the office because this is true, when some people feel that, it's true when I'm working remotely as well. And again, get people involved in talking about it. What works better when you're face to face? What works better when you're working from home? So if you're doing something that's heads down, maybe somebody has reporting responsibilities, maybe you can do that better from home because you have no interruptions. But maybe in a collaborative meeting, it's better to be face to face. And I think it's interesting, the one down here, and I'm sorry, let me bring up my spotlight. This recognizing both large and small efforts. Sometimes only the really big things are recognized, but everybody is helping to work toward our goals. So let's see that recognition everywhere. It's not just dependent on what group you work with or who your leader is. And then you'll start to see all of this where people really are individually inspired and engaged. And this one is a really big one. This peer-to-peer recognition, actually, I interviewed somebody for XLA TV, and it was Nate Brown. A lot of you know him, and his organization at that time, they were doing pulse surveys, and pulse surveys are like employee satisfaction surveys. And he said that the number one indicator of happiness on those pulse surveys for people about their employee that made their employee experience great was their relationship with their peers. And I was actually a little surprised by that. I'm like, really? Not with their leaders? And he said, no, it's with their peers. And so then I said, well, does the leader come into play? They said there's a correlation that if they're happier with their peers, they're happier with their leaders. So building that opportunity in to get feedback from their peers is also very important. And this is a two-way street. When we create a better experience, when we create a better environment for people to thrive, when we can really engage employees, then businesses are seeing results. They're seeing people come, they're there for work more often. So there's a drop in absenteeism and a 75% reduction in turnover. So some things that you can do to improve the culture and drive engagement is, first of all, let them understand, let's live our values. If you're not currently living your values, again, look them up and see, what are we doing every day to make this value a reality? How can I, as a leader, support that? And this was something from Gartner a little while back, where they said that people are seeking personal value and purpose at work. So companies need to be prepared to deliver. Have multi-generational committees making decisions on how to better improve, how to, just on brainstorming, on coming up with ideas, whether it's about a process or something at the workplace, something they can do while they're at work, whatever it is. Let them understand what the long-term goals are. What are we working toward? What do we see in the future? And that includes opportunities to grow. And often in IT, unfortunately, we don't see a lot of growth. Let me rephrase that. We don't see strong career paths. A lot of companies that I consult with, a lot of people that are in training, they say, well, we don't have a career path. You have to wait for somebody to leave a job before that job is open, or, I have to try to figure out what I want to do. So these opportunities to grow, there's so much there, right? There's training, there's having an actual career path. And this comes back again, we talk about self-fulfillment. What is something you really like? I was teaching something recently. Actually, it was an experience class. And I asked, oh no, I'm sorry, it was a KCS class. And in it, we say, what would you do if you had 20% more capacity? And someone said, I would learn more about some of the things that I'm really interested in learning. I'd become more of an expert in that area. And I was like, wow, see, that was an opportunity to grow. Another thing that was a generational comment, where they said that Gen Z wants to be able to grow, but they want to be able to do it in a flexible way. So they like on-demand training that they can take when it's convenient. And then we're going to be looking at this, just start understanding the experience. Have experience surveys, potentially add experience level agreements, for which I will give you an example shortly. So you like the Joe Alexander, I just saw your answer there. You like that quote? I love that quote. And having that feeling of connection. So is there a difference in that level based on the person, hybrid or remote? I think that's a great question, Joe. And I'm hoping I'm going to answer that with some of these examples and some of the, how do you do that? I think first of all, you have to ask the question. I think that's the number one thing I learned in my career is ask, don't assume. So find out, how does somebody feel connected? Some people feel very connected in non-work chat or Slack channels. They say, I've heard it so much in class, and Daryl, you can probably put in there what you've seen as well. People say, oh yeah, well, we have this chat and it's nothing about work. People will put jokes in it. Some people have quote of the day. Some people just vent. It's just something so that we all feel connected. So I think that's a great question. And if anybody has ideas on how it's working in your organization, go ahead and answer that too. What are some things that allow your teams to feel connected, whether they're hybrid or at the office? So some examples, giving them these flexible schedules. And I have an interesting story to share on that one. I was teaching a class. It was a generational thing. We were talking about multi-generational workforce and how to lead and thrive in that. And somebody raised her hand and she said, I have been working for this company for 15 years. I've been in this job for 6 years and never have I have a millennial on my team, and he finished his work and went up to my boss at 2:30 in the afternoon. And he said, hey, I finished this. I'm just really spent. I'm going to go to the gym. I've never done that ever. Not in my 15 years and not in my 6 years. How is that okay? And so then there's this other girl, and she raised her hand and she said, I'm a millennial and I am all about my deadlines. I am all about, I will work so many hours just to get this work done and to make sure that it's good. And she said, and when I'm done, I'm mentally exhausted. I'm emotionally exhausted. I am physically exhausted. And she said, and I might need to have that break. And she said, but what you don't know is maybe he went to work out and maybe he logged in later and he did his email or he did more work. And she said, I don't understand this belief that you have to work between these hours. She said, isn't it really about results? And I thought that was really interesting. And I thought that gave a lot of insight into different people's perspectives. And if we go back to that thought of one size fits all, if there's a leader that believes that you're more productive when you're on site, then that leader might just put that, that policy out there, right? And make that, and then somebody gets shut down. And we are going to see people do want flexibility. And I'm not just saying just the younger generation either, right? Everybody's gotten used to it. So different things too that are just making their jobs easier, potentially having the standing desks, mindfulness techniques. I had somebody in class one time who said, Rand, have you ever heard of mindfulness? Our whole IT department went through mindfulness training. And he said, and we are really focused on it. He said, it is embedded in our culture. He said, I have never felt so good in my life. And he said, I am not stressed. He said, everybody's tuned into each other. He said, nobody gets overworked. He said, he said, it wasn't just a game changer. It was a life changer. So help people, just be more aware. It really is awesome. And no meeting Fridays, or one of my sons has 2 hours off on Fridays during the summer. They can use that anytime they want. Wellness activities. I would love to share another example from class. I had a manager who said that their company during the pandemic HR was requiring wellness activities. And so they had a virtual yoga. He said, I was so upset about it. He said, I was like, virtual yoga? Why do I need to do this? I'm not stressed. And he said, but I had to pump it up, pump my team up over it. And I'm like, yeah, we're going to do this. It's going to be awesome. And he said, it was cameras on. And he said, so we did the virtual yoga. He said, and afterwards, he said, I was sitting there. I'm like, wow. He said, I felt so much better. He said, I am a believer now. So maybe it's not as extreme as virtual yoga on camera, but something. And so please put that in chat. What are you doing for wellness, for well-being? What are some things your company's doing? One thing I've seen, and I want to go back kind of to what Joe Alexander asked, if you are doing things for your teams, you want to make sure that's for everybody, regardless of where they work. And I had some people, a lot of times IT, especially for support, we bring food in, right? Sorry you had to work all those extra hours. Let us bring in lunch, right? Or man, the volume's really high. Let me bring in lunch today. Well, they said that anytime they did that on site, they actually used DoorDash and they delivered it to the people working remotely. And that's a way to feel a little more connected, right? And a little more included. And honestly, having some people work remotely, that's not really new, right? I remember years ago having the little, conference call. I'm not using the right poly something in the middle of the conference table, and you're having this meeting, and then all of a sudden somebody on the phone says, "Hey, I have an idea," and you're like, "Oh yeah, I totally forgot that person was there." Right. And now we're getting better. Polycom. Thank you. That's it. But now we're saying, okay, well, if we're hybrid, we're hybrid. And I see you on the screen while we're in this meeting together. I also think, I know some people hate the cameras being required, but I have had people that are fully remote leaders in class that talk about having one-on-one and coaching sessions, and they don't use the camera. I mean, but we all know most of the message is sent non-verbally, right? And I think that needs to be a requirement, and you will feel more connected. I actually started something during COVID, and it was these meetings on Thursday night, and I met a lot of people I didn't know. And then finally we had an in-person meeting, and when I was there, I went up, I knew I was meeting everybody for the first time. And I went up, I'm like, I'm so happy to meet you. And this person looked at me, she goes, oh my gosh, Rayanne, I totally forgot that I never met you. And she said, that's right. This is the first time we're meeting in person. But we had cameras on in a Zoom meeting, and I totally felt like I was part of them. Like I knew I was meeting them, but they all felt like they already knew me. So have some fun too, some team challenges, definitely look for growth opportunities, potentially have that flex time, and maybe even wellness, not only activities, but even a wellness newsletter, giving people ideas. Community does really matter to people, and even self-proclaimed introverts like to have some kind of social interaction. And I had a class full of self-proclaimed introverts, and yet they had this conversation. They were all big gamers, and they were talking about it. And I asked them, I said, do you wear the headset and do you talk to people while you're playing a game? They're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. So they do want some level of social connectedness, right? They do want community. Maybe that's like interests. Maybe it's, when it matters to them, but everybody gets stronger from each other, right? They find strength from each other, or having somebody that they can turn to. And with all this change, and also with the uncertainty of the future, just like some people are still getting their promotions, but they're not getting the money that was being thrown around a couple of years ago, right? They have some eroded feelings of connection. They don't feel as connected. So I think that's a big focus. Let's start bridging some gaps. Let's figure out how people feel it's connected. And a really good point, Joe, that it's critical to gauge the meeting importance of having the video on or off. You're right. It's not a all on or all off. So we're back to that, right? There's not a all on or off. Let's gauge when it's important. Or if somebody says, hey, I just can't have my like I've had that sometimes. They say, I'm sorry, I can't have my camera on. I have kids running behind me, or my dog is here, whatever it is. But I also think the tolerance level has changed for all of that too, right? But you're right. It's not a it's let's gauge when it, and let people know in advance. If this is a camera on meeting, let people know in advance. And my son, when he was working here, I was joking one time with the class that he would come down in his pajama bottoms, and now it was getting warm, he'd probably come down in his boxers. I thought I was kidding, but I walked out in the kitchen at lunch, and there he is in his boxers. I'm like, what are you doing? And I mean, nice shirt, but he's like, it's like that commercial, that Folgers commercial, if you've ever seen it. So notice it's saying that, again, the peer connection and just connection is so important to people, and it gives them, it energizes them. And again, people care about their values. I'm sorry, I just clicked in the wrong direction. And we need to support that as we move forward. So give them an opportunity. And then there are just some numbers that show that people are happier, and they are much more engaged and involved, and they help the company to succeed, and they're more likely to be loyal to the company and to their teams and to their leaders. And that community, those are cultures that thrive when they have this sense of connection and purpose, regardless of whether it's in person. And again, I'd love for you to put that in there. Here are some ways that it's really important to build community: making sure they have meaningful work. And I read an article about generalists being needed a lot more. However, they don't often feel as valued as specialists, right? Even sometimes first tier feels that way. They're more generalist, right? But when you saw the definition of generalist, it was pretty complimentary, that you can do multiple things, you have multiple responsibilities. It wasn't a negative definition of generalist, but make sure that it's meaningful. They recognize the value of their work. They recognize the meaning of it, that we do have strong leadership. And we've got to be careful. Leaders are employees too. I see a lot of stressed leaders right now because they're wearing more and more hats. They're getting more and more responsibility. And the things that are getting cut are time with their employees, one-on-ones, whatever they used to do, team meetings. They're saying, I don't have time for it anymore. And employees are definitely feeling it. Having this positive workplace, focusing on health and well-being. We talked about all of these, and trust. Trust comes from all of that. And trust comes from strong communication as well. I don't know what I'm doing here with my clicking. And then having an actual communication strategy. I worked with a company recently where everybody feels disconnected. They said projects are going on, they don't even know what they are. Things are getting rolled out, they find out when they get the first call. There are people that are being brought onto a new environment, they don't know about it. That seems like something pretty simple, right? Let's have our meeting. Let's have that out there. Let's see what projects are going on. What are the due dates? And let's get people involved. service desk should never find out from the first phone call. So here are a lot of ideas on what you can do around a communication strategy. And even, just to understand individuals, start potentially this start, stop, continue. Start doing this. This would help me a lot in my job. Stop doing this. Like, it's kind of that positive sandwich, right? Positive on the outside and the end. In the middle, let's talk about what's not working really well. I learned as in a similar activity as a leader that I had a tendency not to tell people the priorities. I didn't tell them the big picture. I just gave them their task. And then when I piled on some more high priorities, they weren't even able to reprioritize because they didn't understand where it fit in the big picture. So that was a stop. And then continue. What's happening really well here? What works really well? So lots of ideas around communication, which builds trust. Also building this loyal, productive team. And there's a lot of what we talked about, but some key pieces here: authentic relationships, a collaborative and communicative culture. Also, I can't tell you how many people I'm seeing just let us know in chat if it's happening to you too, where you're just getting more and more responsibility, where the workload is growing, but the number of people on our teams is not. And have conversations about where people want to go in their careers, what the opportunities are. Something I've heard from a lot of companies that people love is they get to rotate or they get to shadow a team. So anything along those lines. And then lastly, I just want to move into this idea of experience. Experience, everything we talked about is about experience. And if we want to focus on the employee experience, then we need to start asking the questions. So having pulse surveys, going beyond employee sat. This isn't just an employee satisfaction survey. This is not just an HR initiative. This should be company-wide, and it transforms the culture. So these are different things. Are you equipped to do your job? Are you, do you feel this actually includes everything we talked about. Do you feel connected? Do you feel there's sufficient communication? Are you excited to be at work? Do you have the information? Do you trust it? Like, it's got it all built in. Now, these are just examples. There are so many more, but I thought I'd show you an experience level agreement. And I want to clarify something, because people will come to class sometimes thinking that an experience level agreement replaces a service level agreement, but it does not. A service level agreement measures your operational efficiency. And we all know you might be hitting your numbers of your SLAs, but people are still escalating, going and complaining to somebody. So we call those watermelon metrics, right? Where people aren't happy. That's the red on the inside, even though we're hitting the numbers that we think are really important to be very efficient. So XLAs do align. They align SLAs with them because the operational piece is important. However, these are not tied to transactions. We are masters at measuring transactions, but people's experience are made up of every transaction and every aspect of their job. So there's a lot to this. I encourage you to come to our experience classes. We have one in October for XLA Foundation, where you learn a lot more about this. But this would happen. Let's say you have 12,000 people in your organization. This XLA, first of all, we say you collect hints and clues. When you build your XLAs, it would go out to 1,000 people each month in that company of 12,000 people, 1,000 different people. And then we actually have a whole dashboard behind it. And that's the practitioner class that's happening in November. So it's how do we see now, and you'll see a correlation. You'll see a correlation with operational metrics. You'll see a correlation with how technology is performing to people's happiness. So this is an example. Our desired experience that we're trying to create is that they feel that they can perform because of their IT services. And then the XLA question is, do your IT services help you to perform to your best? And then what we learned through it, there's a pointed way of doing this, and you learn what most impacts their ability to feel that they can perform to their best. So in this particular XLA, we found, and it's not always 3, but we found that if they are out of service and they call the service desk, they need to get back to work. That matters to them, and that their IT tools work, they're reliable, and that they can feel successful. They've got the right kind of tools. Well, then here's the alignment with SLAs. Who's responsible for this service desk interaction? The support team. And what are some of the metrics that we measure from an efficiency perspective that help us to create a good experience? And then the tools, who owns that and what do we want to measure? And if you have some of those tools like Nextthink and different tools like that, is it 1E, I think it is, that will show you if something's crashing or if it's slowing down. And so it gives us more insight. And then do you have the tools you need? Is your PC have enough even memory to work? So that's just a glimpse and an example. There are a couple of other experience slides in the extra slides. But overall, when we look at all of this, these are ways to drive engagement. And it's very much about knowing the people that you work with, giving them a voice, not doing a one size fits all policy on everything. And if there's the temptation, then let's look at the other side. Let's understand, why would people feel good about that or not? Are there situations where it's not? And then, you know, Ryan, you mentioned, or Joe, you mentioned, oh, you're telling Ryan, I have to go back and read that. I missed that. You know, sometimes there's a disconnect with leaders. First of all, we need to hear from our leaders, but we need to hear from our teams. And let's understand how they feel today. Let's give the why behind these decisions, or give an opportunity to have choices. You know, if you are coming into the office, at least maybe give them the opportunity to choose the day. Or like Christy had said earlier, that at least they can, you know, come in on meetings. Build and continual improvement into everything. We're not going to be perfect. Perfection is overrated, right? Okay, we're going to try this. Let's see how it works. Let's get your feedback. Let's tweak it. Let's make it better. And remember that when you change processes, you have to consider the impact on your team too. You have to care about your team's experience as well. You know, we wouldn't, and I love this quote by Stephen Covey, you know, do for your teams what you want, what you would do for your best customers. You're not going to roll something out for your best customers and not tell them about it. You're not going to put out a new mandate and not give them any warning. You know, so we want to have the flexibility without sacrificing business results, and we want to make the time valuable that they are face to face. So it all comes down to people. And I do encourage you to learn a lot more about experience, because it is a differentiator. It absolutely, it transforms your culture, and it transforms your business success ultimately. Because when you have a better employee experience, they deliver a better customer experience, and you can move into that as well. So I do heavily advise that you build this experience culture. So I want to give you a few minutes for questions. And thank you for everything that you're putting into chat. And you're right, OLAs are really important too, between teams, measuring improvements. And then Ryan, you had this dress code policy push. See that word? When you see those words in chat, you know that, okay, they didn't feel good about that. It was just pushed on them, and now people don't even put their cameras on. And before, they were on all the time. It's a great point. And I think that they need to get under that. That's one of those opportunities where we did this, we saw this, let's talk about it. What else? Any questions? Anything you want to add? I touched on a lot just because of the time. Do we have anybody that?
Rayanne,
Yes, go
this
ahead,
is
Joe.
Joe Alexander. No, wonderful amount of information. And yes, in an hour, it's a lot of stuff to cover, but thank you so much for
Of
that.
course, you're welcome.
One of the things that, just to get your a little bit more deep dive, and we talked about it, or you talked about it a couple of times, you know, and it's really getting that link, or it's not just one person, right? It's a collective. It
Yes.
takes the associate, it takes the customer, it takes the leadership, it takes all of those pieces and parts. When you see groups, and I think you mentioned you saw one before, where it's either top-down dominant or customer up dominant, what are some suggestions, especially with the remoteness of working with those customers or that leadership, you know, when you can't see them face to face or sit across the desk from them?
That's a great question. Do you feel that you have the opportunity to potentially go and do a site visit? Or can you have a meeting and have people come to it in person?
In the past, I have.
Okay.
It's just one of those things where it's, you know, say you do not have the ability to go and meet them in person. Is a conference call with the video on, let them know ahead of time that it's, like I said, an importance of the call?
I think I would Yes, and I think I would also ask, right? I really think you want to ask and say, hey, I would really like us to get an opportunity. And what's your goal? Is your opportunity for them to get to know each other a little better? If so, maybe do something fun, like use Kahoot, or there are actually virtual escape rooms that people have told me about. Maybe do something fun so they can just have some fun and some downtime with each other. Or is your goal that you're trying to improve maybe some results somewhere? So I think it's important to, and you said it yourself out there, what's the purpose of the meeting and what are we trying to accomplish from it? And then if it is something like building more teamwork or anything along those lines, you might just say, even give people options. I've seen that. Hey, I was considering one of these three things. What are you more interested in? And maybe you do, you start with the one with the highest volume. I think that if leaders are mandating, I think that there need to be some opportunities to have meetings and get insight into how people are feeling. Again, pulse surveys are really helpful with that, and then be able to share that with leadership. So those are a couple of ideas. And if people can put information out there too, I would really appreciate that, because people can have it after. But does that help, Joe? I think it's get their buy-in too, or that, oh, I thought of something I heard. I had some people in class where every team meeting every month, it might even be every week, a different person on the team runs it, and they start off with an activity, and they love it because they get to go look for activities, and they also get to know somebody because of the activities that they do. I don't know if that'll help. There's a whole series of books called Games Trainers Play, and they have lots of icebreakers and different types of activities. So is that a little bit helpful?
No,
I
I
hope.
love that.
Okay.
It is definitely. I mean, and it's great information, especially, Jim will have this posted up on our the Central Florida website. But the thing is, though, is it gives folks on the call or folks that might listen to it later on that one additional toolkit, one additional thing in their toolkit to say, I'm not able to do this today. How can I get it done tomorrow? Whether it's need more equipment or how do I innovate my job? So I love those responses, Rhea. Thank you.
Okay, good. You're welcome. Thank you. And Jim will put that out there. You'll have the slides. I saw a couple of people say that, and you have a couple of studies and just some tips. Just Google it. There's so much that's out there. And it's interesting to see the difference between 2022 and after 2022, just in some of the survey results. All right. No other questions?
We have time for one more question.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I see a lot of familiar faces and names. Thanks. And if you do have any other questions, I'm happy to answer afterwards as well. I didn't put that up, but
Your last
it is
slide
in the
has your
deck.
contact information.
Yeah, in the deck, I've got that. I can certainly put that in there. This is my email address. And then again, you've got some more information in there. There are a lot of extra slides.
Hey, thank you so much, Rayanne,
You're welcome.
for
It was my
your
pleasure.
wealth of insights and ideas. It's always a pleasure to learn from you.
Thank you.
And as I mentioned, I will be posting this presentation and some additional research on our website no later than tomorrow morning. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Hope to see you at our next meeting in October with Doug Raybould on October 5th. Have a blessed afternoon. Take care.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
Our pleasure.
And
My
thanks,
pleasure.
everybody. I meant to say thank you out loud and I was muted. Sorry.
Take care.
No, thank you guys. Thank you both. Thank you, Jim, for the hosting.
Oh, my pleasure, Joe.
Yeah, Joe, thanks for everything you contributed. And I saw you said you just retired, huh? Or you've been retired?
Yes, at the beginning of the year, I retired. So, but I still try to work with some past team members, and going forward, I try to help out folks that are in those type of positions that we just got done talking about. So I love it.
Congrats. That's awesome. I don't know if you know Terry. Oh, why can't I think of her last name right now, Jim? Real active in the local chapters.
Our praise.
Yes, 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 that's her. She's retired, but now she's like teaching at a local community university. But she stays real active too. But again, thanks guys so much.
Oh, our pleasure. Thanks again. Have
You're
a great
welcome.
day.
Bye-bye, you too.
Bye.